about the scenic view on Greenbush Road, north of Lake Road. One from Hans Ohanian about the energy section, response from Rebecca Foster of the Energy Committee, and tonight received a comment from Bill Stuono about the process of the changes that were made after the first public hearing. I don't know if Bill is here tonight, and I guess not. Yep. So this is the second hearing. The statute, which is Title 24, Section 4385, requires the Select Board to hold 2 public hearings. If there are any changes to the document, another hearing will be required. The town's process for adopting the town plan is to submit it to voters. So I think it's been discussed that town meeting is kind of, at this point, the target for submitting it to voters by Australian ballot. And however, if there is a reason that the Select Board feels it shouldn't be put to voters, then there's an ability to put it to a vote at some other time.
Any Select Board members want to?
Well, I'll just make some general comments. I'm in support of the draft as it exists. I've been involved with this process for more than 4 years, because I was on the Conservation Commission when I first started working on the town plan. And I've come to the conclusion over those 4 years that it is not possible to address everybody's concern and let everybody in town have it the way they want it. I think this has been going round and round for years. There's been plenty of time to comment, and it's a good compromise. I mean, I wouldn't say it's exactly the way I want it. I don't think it ever will be, because it has to be a compromise document. If we're going to keep waiting until everybody is happy with it, I won't live that long. So,
I don't know. You're the young buck, Matt. What do you think?
I'd ask anyone here tonight for public comment on the process. I think that's kind of where we are, is evaluating the process and seeing where we're at.
If anyone does have a comment, please use either that microphone or this microphone here. It's not amplification, but it helps VCAM pick it up.
So I actually would say something about the process. Any hearing that I've been involved in since I've been on the board, I always hear the word 2 hearings. I want to hear the word at least 2 hearings, which is our ability to have that. And I've actually been involved with the town plan for all the years that you weren't here. I listened and I understood a lot of it. It's a lot of work. I totally agree with you, Fritz. My thought is that we just we always don't get to have a third one, maybe a third hearing, just to balance it out, you know. I sort of agree with Bill. I'm not sure who this gentleman is, William, but I feel that way, and this type of person isn't represented very often at a meeting, because it's, I don't know, I just feel like it's another way of thinking, and I haven't read it at, that much, just quickly tonight, but a process would have been the charter with, a couple other things that just went 2 and that's it. Where 1 more, in my opinion, would balance it out.
Peter, with Planning Commission, Peter Jocelyn, could you grab the mic or have someone pass it? Sorry. This is not amplification, it just allows VCAM to pick up the sound. Oh, yeah, please. Don't feel like you have to stand up there.
I'd like to just echo a little bit of what Fritz said. I've been on the Planning Commission, I think, over 13 years, and I would say the last 5 to 6, we've been working on this rewrite of the town plan. And in that time, we've had, I don't know how many work sessions where the public was invited to come, and we've received a lot of input from the public at various meetings. At the hearings, the select board gave us some good input. The public also will have, I think it's at least a month to thoroughly dissect the plan, read it and reread it to see if it's something that they either like or don't like, if it's forwarded for a vote. So at this point, I strongly recommend that the select board approve the plan as is and let the public decide. Again, there's been a lot of work gone into this plan, not only by the Planning Commission, but the public at large, committees like Energy Committee, the Trails Committee. A lot of folks in town have put a lot of effort into it. All of the comments have been recorded on a spreadsheet, and we put our comments in terms of how we responded to those comments on the spreadsheet. It's been available to folks in the town. It's been mentioned in numerous articles in the paper. So I think that we've done our best to get everything out there in front of the public. And I would just hope that the select board at this point would let the voters decide. Thank you.
Thank you for all that hard work. I'm sure that was just an enormous amount of people coming together to this document. I certainly would never want to come off that I don't appreciate what we've done. I just think it's interesting.
Yes, please.
You may have put a lot of hard work into this. I can't really judge because I didn't look at the town plan. I only looked at the energy section, which is something on which I'm an expert. My name is Hans Ohanyan. I'm a physicist by training, and I've worked on global energy problems and climate change issues of that sort as far back as 1970. And I am absolutely stunned by the amount of errors that the Energy Committee has managed to pack into the 4 short pages of energy plan that appear in this town plan. It's a miserable production in any case, 4 pages for the energy plan. It's ridiculous. This needs to be spelled out in much more detail, and I understand they are working on this at the Chittenden County, what is it called?
Regional planning?
Yes, Regional Planning Commission, and they are right now correcting their methodology for assigning energy goals, and they won't be finishing this for at least another month or so. And so a final plan, a final energy plan, will not be ready until considerably later. It will certainly not be ready for town meeting. And meanwhile, the Energy Committee has stuffed into these 4 short pages a lot of, well, trash. There are probably more than a dozen significant errors in these 4 pages. And some of them are the sort of stuff that a copy editor would have spotted by just reading it carefully without even knowing anything about energy at all. I'll give you an example. On page 150, item 4, it says, in keeping with the 2016 updated statutory goals of this energy plan, Charlotte will strive to meet 25% of its energy use from renewable sources by 2025, 40% by 2035, and 90% by 2050. this is totally wrong. First of all, the Comprehensive Energy Plan has no statutory goals. It is not an act of the state of Vermont. It has no statutory status. It is merely a recommended plan by the administration that formulated the plan at that time. So the word statutory needs to be struck as being wrongly employed in this place. And what is even worse is that this section refers in a footnote to Title 10, Vermont Statutes, Article 580A, as giving these numerical goals for renewable energy. You read that article, you will find that this is wrong. That article does not mention the year 2035, and it does not mention the year 2050. It merely sets a goal for the year 2025. So it is a total error as a matter of law that this quotation was put there in the form that it was. And this is the sort of thing that really should be corrected by employing a professional copy editor who goes through this stuff and checks it for nits of the sort and makes the necessary correction. I have a whole list of other things I could go over this, which involve actual energy issues and false statements about the energy issues. But I think that since no member of the Energy Committee is here, am I correct in this? I don't think there's much point of me going down this list. I suppose I could send them my list by mail, but I feel that somebody needs to go over this and correct it, and you should not put it before the voters when it contains such obvious errors in fact and obvious errors in law. It, in certain sense, might render the entire document invalid when you misquote statutes of the state of Vermont. So I think that's all I really needed to say here. I want to abstain from giving you my preferences in matters of energy planning. I'll reserve these for when the final plan will be developed after the Chittenden Commission sends along its recommendations. But at least if this is a one-year plan, you should get rid of obvious errors of fact and obvious mistakes that just make this whole thing look ridiculous. Thank you.
I guess, Peter, in addressing that issue, do you know offhand if the errors Hansel was talking about were in the town plan that we currently have, or if these were added?
I don't know. I mean, I read what we got from regional, non-legal. I do know that as far as Act 174 goes, that's something that we knew we couldn't complete that to be compliant with Act 174 and get the plan to the vote. So our intention has been for some time, and we discussed this with the Energy Committee, to be working on that after hopefully we get the plan to the vote and if it was passed, we would be working on this over the next year or so. I'd also just like to say that, again, the town plan is a living document. Are there errors in it? I'm sure there are. Things that we missed. 7 or 8 years ago, we had a fairly lengthy, what we call an oops list from the previous plan where we made corrections as we found them. A lot of them were pretty minor things to grammatical errors, to maybe citing the wrong statute or things like that.
Marty? Oh, could someone pass the mic to Marty? And if you could introduce yourself, that would be great. Thank you.
Marty Illick, Planning Commission. This is a really complicated topic. And we're all on a big learning curve about this, and of course, it's a new statute in state law, and we recognized that we could not put into this town plan what needs to be put in as per statute. So we say out straight out at the onset of all this that this is the next step after we get this plan in place, which does need to be put in place, to take the next steps to put into the town plan an amended town plan, which would include the language that needs to be put in there, RE, Act 174 and energy. So I would take a little issue with how you characterize the language in this chapter, in that where it says under number 4, Charlotte, tomorrow, in keeping with 2016 updated statutory goals of the Comprehensive Energy Plan, it's an acronym CEP, that by saying that, it doesn't mean that we're statutorily obliged to do X, Y, or Z. It's just a statute that says we're doing an energy plan. And we've said this in the last public hearing, the stuff that we're putting into our town plans around the state of Vermont, we're all doing this. It's all state stuff. So every town will have this language as advised by RPC and guided by the regional planning commissions. And we're not putting in rules at the state level or regs at the town level. We're not doing that. It's aspirational. We're just educating ourselves about what we're trying to do as a state and a region and a town. So that's how we're interpreting it at the Planning Commission level. So I don't think we need to change that language. We can improve upon it for sure. But I feel like the intent is to just aspire to meet these targets. And we're not going to give ourselves any regulations, but we are putting it in the town plan to do voluntary measures. So I don't know if that helps.
Hans, do you have a response to what Artie's bringing up?
I apologize that I don't quite follow what is going on here. I suppose I learned to speak English at a late age. And so maybe I don't understand what statutory means. Will somebody enlighten me?
Statutory, Marty Yolick Planning Commission, means that it's part of Act 174, which is statute, so it's a law. So
But that is not what it says here. Statutory goal of the CPE. So you're saying that
Okay.
statutory applies to the Comprehensive Energy Plan,
Yes.
which it does not, because the Comprehensive Energy Plan is not a statute. It is not.
We're playing semantics here, and maybe Jim can speak to it, but I think the bottom line is that what we're putting in here is not to do with regulatory affairs.
Jim Donovan, Town of Charlotte. And my understanding, statutory basically means that we have to do this. It doesn't say that we're going to be making statutes, but state statutes say we have to do this. So we need to have the energy plan in there. And they set out a lot of directives in terms of how that energy plan is supposed to be developed over time. So we're taking our first steps to follow the statute of the state.
So to maybe add a little more clarification, the statute says we shall make a plan.
The 2016 statute?
Yes, the statute says we will make a plan. The plan has been prepared. So what we're doing as municipalities is to try to implement the plan. But it's not a law, it's not a regulation, and it's not an ordinance. It is not a rule, which are the regs at the state level. And at the town level, we're not going to have a regulation. That's what we understand today. So it's the state it's not statutorily, we're not going to have rules to put that statute on the ground, as far as we understand today. It's complicated, for sure, but.
Explain the footnote.
the 33 footnote?
The 22 footnote.
22 or 30, 30,
Footnote 22 on page 150.
I only have 31 and 32. So we have different versions.
how could that be?
Sorry.
I checked this one
I
against the
know.
printout that is sitting there.
Okay. So this is my page.
Is that, wait,
No, it's page 150, not page 350.
energy plan.
I have no idea why there's this discrepancy.
Yeah, the one that was mentioned.
That's the one that was received by the town clerk, so that's the one that's on record.
Okay, so now we label that series.
33, I thought.
I think in the meantime, it's important to point out to everybody here that if this is not passed at town meeting, which is up to the voters, we will have no town plan. We cannot refer to what's in any town plan if somebody challenges a zoning rule or any other regulation that we have or plan that we have, because there is no valid town plan in place. So I agree that there are probably things in here that need to be amended, but I weigh that against the possibility of having no town plan for any number of months and what may or may not happen or be challenged if there is no town plan.
Again, I agree with you. And when I talked to Daryl probably a week and a half ago about the town plan, he told me that the energy would need to be looked at and amended, you know, within the next year because of all the, what's going on.
I did read, I
So
just,
it shouldn't make me totally happy, but
The town plan can't override the state statute anyways, so if the information in our town plan isn't totally in line with either the language now or in the future, the state statute takes over anyways. But in reference to the zoning bylaws, there are certain zoning bylaws that reference the town plan. And like Fritz said, those zoning bylaws could be in question if there is no plan to reference. Because we look at the zoning bylaws, and if somebody's doing something and it references the town plan, we look at the town plan when we're deliberating or in the meeting and see what is supposed to, what the town plan says should happen in that area. And so we need to get a town plan approved in order for the boards to make their proper decisions.
I read just read the letter that you referenced from Bill, I can't pronounce his last name correctly there. I have to challenge a couple of the points made. It says that the changes were made at the planning committee level and not via the select board. They were proposed verbally at the last select board meeting, and there were at least 2 select board members at planning committee meetings that voiced what their changes were from a select board level, and the planning committee, while it was still their document, made the changes, but it was not made by the planning commission. The changes were made as requested by select board members, in particular myself and Lane were at 2 of the meetings. So I don't,
everybody worked really well together, I know that.
I don't find that this claim that it's made by the planning commission and not the select board, I take exception to that in that letter.
All right, I just read it quickly, so
Yeah,
there's a
so
few
I just-
points that, yes,
Yeah.
I
I agree.
totally There's a few things. It just goes along with me liking to have 3 hearings versus 2.
We have another comment?
Thank you. My name is Jeff Martin. I'm a Charlotte resident. I first of all have a question about process. I just want to, I wonder if I could have clarification. So are you still accepting changes or additions to the town plan this evening?
No changes can be, well, so no changes can legally be made to the town plan at this point in the process to continue with a vote. This is the second hearing, and I think no changes were permitted 15 days prior to the final public hearing. The choice of this being the final public hearing is at the discretion of the select board at this point. So if the select board felt that another public meeting was necessary because changes were necessary, that's totally a possibility at this point. What that would preclude is the ability to have it voted, the town plan voted on at town meeting. There wouldn't be enough time.
Can you clarify that? Sorry, Linda Samter in Charlotte. Because I understand it's a 15-day window, so there's certainly 15 days before town meeting day to be able to hold a third and final meeting. That's the requirement for that.
Maybe.
The timing doesn't work as far as making any changes to make it on town meeting day. I think the select board is accepting public comment. They'll hear your comments and then decide whether or not to make any changes or not.
And it's not just 15 days. I mean, it's, if we change something, if we accept something tonight and the planning commission has to go through the process, and then there has to be, then that has to come, and there has to be another 15 days from then, and so another meeting from the zone, from the select board. So it's not just 15 days.
Makes has to then be reviewed by the planning commission and then sent back.
From the, say there was, Peter Kahn, Charlotte, say there was another public hearing, what is the period between the public hearing and the town meeting day? What is that length of time that's required? Because it seems like there may be
From
room
the
for...
final hearing to a vote?
From a final hearing to a vote, yeah, final public hearing.
Well, one, it would have to be on our warning, which we were planning on approving or looking at approving tonight. So that, because everything's got to be, most of the documents have to be done by January 29th. So if we can't, right, but right now we're in the process of approving everything by January 29th. So, because that's when things are supposed to be completed, hopefully, ready for town meeting day. So hopefully, if we get this done now, then we can finalize everything on by January 29th, and everything can go through.
Well, what is the, we understand that you guys have been working on this for years. And we are here on the last day. We do have comments, and that's the bad news. So we're just trying to understand, without missing the town meeting for the vote, would it be possible to warn another public hearing? And I guess what would make that possible is to know the length of time that's required between a final public hearing and putting it to the vote. And that may disrupt the schedule as you have planned. We understand that. But what's possible?
Yeah, well, the town report is going to the printer on the 29th, and that includes the warning for the meeting. I'd suggest you make your comments and let the select board decide whether or not they're going to.
Sure.
So just to underscore something that Peter just said, and maybe this goes without saying, but we really do understand that people have been working on this for a very long time. Having spent some time on the school board and community committees and boards, I understand what it's like to work very hard on things and not have public input until the last moment, and I know that's frustrating. So we're here representing actually 30 Charlotte residents, and we have some changes and some additions that we'd like to propose. And we have a copy of all of this that we can submit. So if you'd like, I can go through this. The first change that we'd like to ask for is in Chapter 1, Section 1.6, Agriculture and Forestry. We'd like to add the following at the end of the introduction paragraph, which is similar to the format of Section 1.9 in the Economic Development Introduction.
Yes.
Yes, page 17. Page 17. Yes, Chapter 1, page 17. So, starting with, quote, "This chapter is intended to provide specific recommendations to address these challenges while preserving Charlotte's character and values, and to align closely to the following goals stated in Section 1.1 under Vision and Goals. Number 1, to balance property owner rights to reasonably use their land in keeping with overall public health, safety, welfare, and the goals of this town plan. Number 2, to maintain and enhance the integrity and continued viability of natural and cultural features with high public value, including land and active agricultural use, prime and statewide agricultural soils, steep slopes, flood hazard areas, surface and groundwater resources, shoreland buffers, special natural areas, wildlife habitats, water supply source protection areas, and other ecologically important natural areas, scenic views and vistas, historic districts, sites and structures, and conserved land. Number 3, to promote a sense of community, sustainable agricultural economy, and environmentally sound rural and small business enterprises. And finally, number 4, to promote access and appropriate use for open land and recreational resources. Next.
And that is a repeat from...
Yes. So just reiterating what's already in the plan, but putting that into the introduction for agriculture and forestry, similar to how it's stated in the economic development introduction. And then second, on Chapter 1, page 18, we'd like to add the following to the forestry and agricultural policies section. First, to the extent that an agricultural use or practice may represent a significant change from a previous agricultural use or practice, the new agricultural use or practice will meet the town goals as stated in this plan, including ensuring public health, safety, welfare, and the protection of surface and groundwater resources. Second, pesticides, fertilizers, and other potentially hazardous materials used on the farm property shall not be allowed to migrate off-site and/or to adjacent properties in keeping with the town plan goals of ensuring public health, safety, and water quality. And third, agricultural use and practices and farm-related businesses shall be compatible with the scale and the nature of the adjacent land use. That final point we adopted directly from the town of Shelburne in their comprehensive town plan from 2016. Finally, we'd like to, in Chapter 1 on page 20, we'd like to delete a portion of item number 10, where it says that Charlotte views itself as a partner in the state's implementation of required agricultural practices on local farms and recognizes that their successful application relies upon a complaint-driven approach. We'd like to ask that the latter portion of that statement be stricken, where it says, and recognizes that their successful application relies on a complaint-driven approach. And again, this is submitted by 30 Charlotte residents. Thank you.
I'd like to just add that we are responding to comments that were made after the first hearing that are listed in your responsive plan. So this would be our first opportunity to see those changes that were incorporated because they were added in after. So it's not a change that, or something that's been in the plan to be able to be reviewed by the public from years ago. It's something that just happened a few weeks ago.
This was the last recommendations from the select board?
for that example, that last comment about the complaint-driven approach was added in December 14th or later, because that's when the comment came in, which is after the December 11th first public hearing.
Yep.
So.
Well, thank you for your comments. I'd just like to say, you know, my personal take on the process, updating this town plan predates my time on the board. That's how it's been going on for quite a while. And I'm pretty sure that the town plan that we're using is basically a carbon copy of a previous town plan that the town just decided to pass just so that we had a working town plan. So it's already, process-wise, been a long time without any updates. I think that's why so much time and energy went into reorganizing and updating this town plan over a long period of time. We had an employee change with our town planners during this process. We also utilized outside consulting to help with the public input process. But at the first hearing, December 11th, there were quite a few proposed changes to me, which seems like at the last hour of a 5 to 8 year process. And what the select board decided to do was to allow people to submit comments in a very similar fashion as the ones you've just submitted, and have those go to the planning commission as if they were submitted by the select board. As far as the statute is concerned. That's how that process unfolded with the comments that you saw added after the December 11th meeting. Those were all emailed from different private parties to the town planner. He then put a great spreadsheet together, evaluated them all on the select board's behalf, and sent that document for the planning commission to consider as select board edits to the plan. And then last week, we had a working meeting as a select board to look at them, at which it became, I think the most salient issue that we were really looking at was no longer the content of the document or the content of the edits, but rather the weighing the risk benefit of not passing a plan before our current town plan expires, or allowing the town plan to expire with the desire to have a more perfect town plan that would take more time to complete. So I guess for me, the impasse that I'm at with where the select board intersects statute and the select board's responsibility to the town as a whole to have the land use regulations supported by an existing town plan is something I am looking to learn more about. I think if there are people in the audience who could speak to the risk benefits of not having a plan versus having a plan, that would be helpful for, I think, the board.
I'm not sure we're there. I guess that was my questions before. I'm not sure we're at the point where making a change means you were missing town meeting day. That's why I'm trying to get a feel.
Well, the plan has to be approved by the 29th to get the 29th of January to get on to the warrant or the town warning for the town meeting.
So it needs to be
So
more-
15-day, even if this was just a simple 15-day process, 15 days from the 29th is sometime last week.
I guess, can those dates run concurrently? Can you not warn the town plan to be voted Australian ballot and have that clock run, and while having the 15-day clock run for the final hearing? Because I looked for that, I couldn't see anywhere where that specifically said it couldn't be done.
Liam, do you have a comment about that?
I'm not town council, but maybe I can explain it this way. In order, there has to be a vote at town meeting day. This is a warned item, so it has to be available also for write-in votes ahead of time, and therefore the ballot itself has to be finished by January 29th. And when you put it on the ballot, it has to be, do you want to vote for this town plan? And the town plan has to be final as the date of the warning. So as of January, so there is no time, because you have to, your warning has to be final. You can't say, shall we vote on a town plan that is not yet finished, because that's the outcome.
Do you have experience with other towns? Have they been in a situation where they risk exposure due to having an expired town plan? That was really the crux of the issue that was presented to us at the last working meeting.
If I can ask Dean, has the current town plan been previously extended?
It was, yeah, it was readopted once.
Yeah. It is my recollection is that you get a chance to re-warn your town plan once, and then after that, you have to adopt a new plan. What the issues would be, there'd be two. One, you can't adopt any new zoning while you don't have a town plan, or you have an expired town plan. And two, obviously, in areas like conditional use criteria where it says, is it consistent with the town plan, then there is no town plan to be consistent with, and obviously that type of criteria would not be looked at because there is no town plan.
Do you know if that is a ticking clock, or if there are already projects that are before the planning and zoning boards?
Any project that has a completed application before the adoption of the new town plan would be subject to the then existing town plan. But if the plan were to expire and then a new project were to come in with a completed application during the period of time the town plan expired, that would not be a criteria that would be allowed to be imposed.
Christina?
Well, I was just going to help out a little bit with the whole voting thing. We have many, many people in this town that vote by absentee ballot. So we are restricted by dates on when to have those ballots available in accordance on when the town meeting warning is posted. So at that point in time, understandable that you guys would like to have it, but it has to have 2 warrant hearings, and that's before it's actually put on the town meeting warning. And in order for a ballot to be created for it, we are in a pinch for time via absentee ballot voters that will live in Florida and want their ballots. And we have to statutorily provide them in X amount of days prior to the election. So for town meeting, we are getting to crunch time.
So I'm feeling as if we should put it to the voters for town meeting day. But you guys are a perfect example as to why everything needs 3 times, because you think it's easy to get the word out for people to know things, but everybody sees it so many different ways, and so I don't think I think we'd be putting the town at a risk without without voting a town plan.
Right, but there has been more than 2 meetings. I mean, there's only been 2
Well,
select board
yes,
meetings, but there
but-
have been plenty of planning commission meetings on this particular subject.
Well, I agree, but even those, it's really hard to get the word out to the general public to know about those meetings. I know a lot of people have shown up at the different ones, but there's a lot of other people that also hear it as it gets closer to the vote. People pay attention, not so much you, but other people will. There's a lot of people that probably don't even know that I mean I don't mean to say a lot, but.
I'm sure there's people that have never read the Old Town Plan.
Right.
Peter?
The need to have 3 hearings. I think we can rest assured that if we have 3 hearings or we have 4 hearings, there would be some folks that would have suggestions at a 4th hearing or a 5th hearing. And I would just like to reiterate that this is a living document. There's nothing that we can make changes whenever we care to going forward, and we should be. We haven't, as Matt said earlier, the plan that we have right now is really the 2008 plan that we readopted in 2013. We made a few minor amendments, energy amendments, to be in line with state statute. I also would like to just say that I would hate for the select board to feel that you have to let the town vote on it because we're not going to have a plan. I think that would be short-sighted. There's a lot of good things in this plan. It's a good plan. It's not perfect. The Constitution was not perfect. There were lots of amendments made to the Constitution. But updates can be made. Again, they're meant to be made. There's a lot of good things in this plan that it's a good, excuse me, it's a good plan. So I wouldn't want you to feel like you're compromising because you feel like you have to because we wouldn't have a plan.
Well, we're gonna have to do those amendments on the energy section anyways, later.
Well, yeah.
Eventually we will.
174.
Well, will these folks be able to add these if they went through the process and wanted certain things added to the town plan maybe, or consider?
For my response to Peter, the historic model is it's been 10 years since the town has had, anyone has had the ability to really make substantive changes to the town plan. So historically, it has not been a living document. But my commitment through seeing this process unfold in the 4 years I've been on the board is I really think the town plan should be voted on every year. And Darryl made a recommendation last week that it does come up for a vote every year. There's sections, but amendments should be considered every year rather than looking at a 10-year process, especially now that instead of every 5 years, it's going to be 8 years.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and it slipped my mind, but I wanted to add that on. You're right. We haven't made any amendments, and the reason why is because we've been focused on the rewrite. If you look at the implementation plan, there are, I think I counted 34 items that either the Planning Commission is responsible for or in tandem with the Select Board, things that we should be working on. But our focus has been on trying to get the town plan rewrite complete so we can act on all of these implementations that we have in the town plan. Thank you.
Liam,
Yes, I have a question, a comment, and then a question, and depending on the answer to the question, a comment. So just as with my general land use attorney hat on, it has been my experience that most towns don't change their town plan within the 5 years. They, 7 to 8 years is the norm, and there's obviously a reason for that, and I'm not sure if it makes sense to have a town plan and then try to pass individual changes, because then the individual changes become the focus of the vote and not the bigger picture. But that's just a comment. The question I have is, wondering, Dean, if you could pull up the future land use map. And I have a question about, it's just hard to read, and I have a question about a particular property. Okay, so in the village, in the West Village, the circle. My question is if whether you can tell me or whether the Planning Commission can tell me whether the circle includes or excludes the old Lantern property.
I can't recall.
I would just first point out that in the legend, the circle is defined as concentrated community area, just so we know what we're talking about. I think my understanding of this map is it was not intended to be a zoning map, which in the past, the land use map has been essentially a zoning district map. And I think the Planning Commission tried to get away from that. For instance, the existing land use map is essentially a zoning map. It shows the districts It's the same as the zoning map. And so I think the future land use map was intended to be what may be called a bubble map, which is more, I guess, more general in nature and more concept than zoning.
Well, I'm wondering if that is reflected anywhere in the town plan, because now my comment. My concern has been, and as you know, I'm actually, so now I'm putting a hat on. I'm here representing the Gaujacks who own Lantern. As you know, their use has been challenged in many different fora, and it continues to be challenged. One of the problems has been the old Lantern has been in existence since 1963. Zoning in the town came in June of 1966. And from that first zoning ordinance and throughout every zoning ordinance since, it has never allowed for or provided for the continued use of that property for its use as a community facility and an event facility. And if the way these town plans work and the current Title 24 works is that if you were to adopt a new zoning, that zoning has to be consistent with the town plan. And I just want to make sure that by drawing circles the way this has been done and these hatched lines, which the green indicates that it's supposed to be natural and the brown is supposed to be agricultural, that if, for example, the old Lantern property is listed as natural and agricultural, then you could never, the town could never get to a point where it might expand the zoning for the West Village area to include it, because it would be then inconsistent with this town plan. And that's the concern about this bubble approach. If Planning Commission or Dean can assure me that there is language in the remainder of the plan that says that this future land use map is a conceptual and the lines aren't intended to guide future land use, then that would make sense. But that's not really what it says. This says this is the future land use, and the concentrated community area is in that circle, and the green lines and the brown and the brown background. So I'm raising it as a concern, and I do apologize to bring it up so late. Obviously, the Gaujacks were distracted by other things recently and had to be dealing with that, and it's only recently come to our attention that this is continuing to be an issue, and that if at any time the community wants to redress the current problem that they have by allowing it within a zoning ordinance, we just don't want this town plan to preclude that from happening in the future.
Charlie? Peter, do you have?
Well, I would just reiterate what Dean said, which was that it's of a general nature, really, and it was the result of the workshops that were held, I want to say 4 years ago, about where collectively we thought there might be future cluster development. That's the gist of it. So the circles was really just to give a general area of where the consensus was that there might be a good fit in terms of clustered development in those areas.
I have a question on your letter. And, well, the one that this group has submitted, and I understand where just about everything comes from, except the very last one where you want to strike that it recognizes a successful application relies on a complaint-driven approach. what's wrong with a, why? What's wrong with a complaint? I mean, if you don't have a complaint-driven approach, are you implying that there's a cop that goes out and hunts for these things?
I think the concern of the neighbors was that basically that one interpretation of that section is that the town doesn't have a role until actual harm has occurred. And that was the particular concern. That's one interpretation of that, that until something negative has occurred and a complaint is generated, that's when the town has a role. And I think that our perspective was that the town can be involved proactively, not just reactively.
That was one of the filters that I had in looking through this town plan, was there were a number of things that I asked to be changed that took the town out of the, for lack of a better description, the policeman role, because the economics of actually trying to write a regulation that puts us in that activity like this. First, you have to have the person to do it. You have to write the enormous amount of rules that they're supposed to follow. So there was a number of things in the town plan that recommended that the town was going to enforce things. But the practical application of actually trying to do that was, in my opinion, cost prohibitive and voluminous. I understand, but I'm curious. You answered my question, so I understand.
Yeah, I would just want to respond that it's correct, the town does not have a role in agricultural practices. It's governed by the state, not the town.
But that's not, that really is irrelevant to, you know, the Charlotte views itself as a partner in the state's implementation of required agricultural practices on local farms. That's not, that says Charlotte's views itself as a partner. It's not saying they're the policeman or enforcer.
And that's in your town plan, we're not taking it out, it's right there.
That's language in your town plan. It's just, it's cured that the second part that is also in the current town plan.
Well, that was added on this after December 14th. That second part was added.
The second part was recently added, and recognizes that their successful application relies upon complaint-driven approach. That's the part that seems...
That's saying it's successful only if it's a complaint. That doesn't seem right.
That's almost setting up the town as an enforcer, frankly. That's setting up a situation where somebody makes a complaint and then the town enforces this RAP. As a, you know, that frankly is, I think, drawing the town in deeper than just saying Charlotte views itself as a partner with implementation of required agricultural practices.
Well, implementation is, I mean, you can implement any number of things to see if it's actually followed up, takes the police part. You can implement energy plans, you can implement streetlight plans, you can implement any kind of thing. And it's out there, these are the rules, it's implemented, everybody follow it. So it's the what if they're not is, okay, someone's complained that they're not following your rules, then we do something. If it's not complaint driven, it means, to me, it means that, well, okay, someone has to go around and look to make sure this has been implemented, and who is going to do that?
For required agricultural practices, it would be the state.
Well, and the state would, I don't know if they have people that come around and look. I mean, they do. I've had some with FSA come and look around, and some particular on drainage issues, and I assume that's theirs responsibility.
For the TMDL regulations.
Well, it's, yeah, mostly water quality, but they updated from accepted agricultural practice to the required agricultural practices just last year. And they had
swept in a bunch of the medium and small farms into the regulation.
Just as a general concept, the idea that, so then if the town is a partner with this, the concept that they're just gonna react after something bad happens, just as a general concept seems like, that does not seem like a success, a successful application of anything as a reactive, after something bad happens and someone makes a complaint, then we're gonna get involved. That just, that concept just doesn't sit well with us.
I hear that. Marty, did you have a response?
Now?
You sure?
Okay. The way the law is written today, the Agency of Ag's language, they have the new RAPs, the required versus accepted. They also have, this is simply describing how the Agency of Ag operates today. That's all this is trying to do. That's the intent of that sentence. And the complaint part is simply what they have online, what they have on the website. If somebody sees something that hasn't been, brought up to par, so to speak, there's a pathway for residents or anybody to come in and fill out a complaint form and submit it. That's all that's describing. So it's simply describing the current way that we operate as a state. That's all that's doing. It is no way suggesting that we rely upon the complaint component to do what the inspectors do way more frequently now than they ever did before, based upon Act 64. So apologize that that language is giving you that message, but it is not the intent of that sentence to suggest that, all regulations are enforced or complied with based upon complaints. That is not the intent of that sentence.
Marty, I'd also like to ask, you and Jim both have done a lot of work with Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission, and it looks like, going back to Liam's concern about map 12, the future land use map. Dean, could you bring that up? So one thing that came up is the disclaimer in the bottom left was added to all of these maps. I don't think it really applies to the comment. So I guess I wanted to ask you and Jim, because you serve on behalf of Charlotte on the Regional Planning Commission, the definitions on the top left of the map, concentrated community area is defined to provide for clustered mixed uses to fulfill housing, employment, and public and private service needs within the town. So if the Old Lantern does fall within that area, in the brown bubbles, versus natural and agricultural, which is more likely in the yellow than it is in the brown, yellow, existing community. What is your understanding of, are other towns using future land use in their town plans to inform, limit, or enable future zoning regulations in their towns?
Excuse me, Jim Donovan, current representative of the Regional Planning Commission for Charlotte. And yes, they do. Short answer. That's what it's supposed to do, is this is what we hope the town will be in the future, and your zoning is supposed to be set up so that it leads towards that future. In terms of whether that line is considered an absolute circle or a bubble, is something that is not necessarily from regional planning, that's from the town, and the town can interpret that any way they'd like. I haven't looked at that particular portion of the new town plan, and so I don't know whether in the area that's talking about the future town plan, does it say that this is sort of a general area or not? And that, I think that sort of gets to the key of what Liam is talking about, or asking about.
So Charlie, Peter, and Marty, did the Planning Commission look at this intersection of this future planning that Liam's asking about and consider that issue?
That we would look at it?
Did the planning commission in making the
We
map?
didn't look at specifically in terms of, these, again, were just very rough outlined areas that came as a result of this planning session there were a lot of people in town here sticking pins in maps to see where folks thought there could be future cluster development. So the circles are very general in nature. They're not specific. We didn't look at it in detail and say, well, we wanted to.
Excuse me again. That's the question. Does the plan say that, what you're describing, or does it not? That's the question. Because I understand and I agree with you, and I think it's a good idea, but does the plan actually explain that?
The plan, this is Charlie Pugh, Planning Commission. The plan doesn't specifically say the brown circles are generic in nature. It doesn't say that anywhere in the plan. But if you go back and read through this, it does talk about all the different considerations that go into figuring out what the future uses are for various lands around the town. And there's a lot of considerations that come into play as to deciding what goes where. I'm trying to. So I'm just looking at. So page 1, 2, is your land use policies, and it's under key planning considerations.
Did you do a word search for chapter just for reference to that map? I mean, isn't that, or just future land use, isn't that the issue? Is where is that map reference?
Oh yeah, word search for map 12.
Yeah, and that should be the key question. I apologize, I can't do that on my phone.
It's online. I don't know if I can.
Control F.
Thanks, Liam.
Map 12.
Do you have this as a hard copy?
Just take out 12.
Wildlife habitat map. There's 37. Official map. Official map. Oh, there we go.
Back to that last one.
That was an official map, which is a different animal.
Well, I mean, this is related when we get there. If you look at page 125, this is related because it shows what the West Village is, and the West Village map does not extend to the old lantern. It stops, which is sort of a weird place to stop.
This is the village designation map?
Yes.
So
Yeah, 125.
That's a different.
we went through some.
That was actually walked with staff from the state that staffs that program, and they said you can't jump when there's residents in between. They're looking for village designation of adjoining commercial and civic uses, not civic uses, residential civic uses. They want a core of civic uses for the.
But the understanding when the question came up about the village designation map was that it was not at all to inform the zoning maps of the town, that it was just being provided to apply for the designation from the state.
Yeah.
Doesn't show up, and that's why.
There's no maybe there's no references to it. If I go back to map.
That's probably not good.
Water quality, habitat,
Text line.
resource, mapping,
He said if it's
maps, maple.
guaranteed voted on tonight, so that he wants to weigh in.
Map of farmland. Continue to inventory and catalog and map historic and cultural features. Scenic road map, but that's it. So I don't believe, yeah, it's, Charlie was in the process of explaining how they interpret it. Do you want to go back to that?
For reference of it, it's not necessarily reference. The land use talks about it. The land use piece talks about using all the different parts of the town plan to make decisions about land use.
Let's get back up. Oops. The design guidelines?
Advisory only.
Yeah, it's kind of different.
Just as a reference, to that future development, any kind of a change to zoning would go to the town for a vote.
I'm sorry, what?
And just thinking a little bit more about that future land use map, if there were any suggested changes to zoning, then it would go before the town for a vote.
Right.
I didn't think a plan would be to the specific level of including or approving zoning. It's a plan, it's not the functioning map.
No, but the new zoning bylaws are put in order to guide you to the plan.
Yes, but
the
the
future
zoning
plan.
bylaws are
So this plan gets approved so that the planning commission can write zoning bylaws or amend the zoning bylaws to accomplish this, to head towards this
That's the
result.
point when a map would get specific. Does it include this lot, does it not include this lot?
There will be
Would be at the-
and there would be maps adopted within our zoning bylaws. It'd be official maps adopted
Yes.
that would guide, that the zoning bylaws would reference. And those are, again, something that gets updated all the time.
Marty?
When this map was generated, it was done really based upon a workshop, results of a workshop. And the intent of that workshop exercise was trying to recognize the tension in the village areas, like we don't want more in the village and this sort of thing. That was a real big reality in our community. So this workshop exercise was trying to show where on the landscape of this town there could be some villagey hamlet/hamlet, you know, that whole part of us where we do our PRDs and we cluster houses. Those are the areas that are the most dense today. That's all that's showing. So it's just sort of a guidance tool to say, hey, you know, if you wanted to have some more neighborhood type activity, that could be a place to do it. And the regulations that would come from that may decide if there's going to be mixed use or whatever kind of personality you want to attribute to that piece of geography. That's just guidance for the next steps of where you might want to do further investment, public investment, and develop these sort of neighborhood type things. That's what that's for.
I recognize that that is the intent and how it came into being. I'm just also hearing concern from someone with a lot of experience in this field that there may be an unintended consequence that the Planning Commission did not consider in that workshop of placing pins on a map. And that's something that I think we're looking at now.
Okay.
are there unintended consequences to that map?
Can I just respond to that? I don't think ever seen a zoning district that's a perfect circle. So I don't think this is intended to be, say, commercial use is within the circle, commercial use is not outside the circle.
The other part of the comment was the agricultural and the natural delineations. Where are those?
Within the circle.
Where are those coming from? And outside? Where were those derived from?
Okay, there's a, I'll try to zoom in, it might be hard to see, but there's,
The green stripes and the...
yeah, so the sources, community agriculture, natural, developed by Ginny McCrum, land use process, documentation. So natural derived from 2008 significant wildlife habitat map, agricultural derived from 2000 ag land use map. The community was created from a heat map of E911 sites and used for 4 or more sites consider major subdivision. I think the potential that there could be a subdivision of 4 lots.
So to Jim's point, this is driving future land use zoning bylaws that could be proposed.
I look at it so
It may.
broad that it couldn't.
But there's stuff that's not in the town plan that could drive a future zoning consideration that we're not even talking about tonight. So, I mean, there's, right?
You couldn't use something so broad and so general to try to come down with a specific use. I mean, that can only be recommended. You know, this is what happens in this area. So that tells you to look for those things. To try to use such a, I mean, those, just the width of the circle is lots wide. I mean, it's too big. It couldn't function as that, in my opinion.
Mike, have a comment?
Doesn't Fritz's disclaimer at the front of the map section also say that this is not intended for detailed planning purposes?
Is that at the bottom left? I think
It's different.
No,
There's a sheet, there's a disclaimer
right,
sheet.
at the beginning of the map section.
So, and I think that's intended, right, Fritz, to apply to all these maps?
The maps contained within the town plan are provided as a visual context to the rest of the plan. The maps are not of a scale or completeness to be utilized for detailed planning exercises. Information represented is what was known at the time of the plan's publication. However, information may have changed in the intervening period. For accurate and current map information, please contact the town office, planning and zoning. And that's pretty much what he says about if you're looking for something specific in planning.
Other comments, questions?
I just would like you to clarify the procedure for the amendment of the energy plan. That will happen 1 year from now, or what?
There's the Energy Committee, when we last met with them, specifically about Act 174, we decided that there would be a subcommittee that would start working on how to integrate Act 174 into the plan. So there's folks from the Energy Committee and from the Planning Commission that are just, I think, beginning to meet on that now. So we would expect that it's probably going to take a year, perhaps, to integrate it and then amend it, the town plan.
So the amendment will be voted upon in 2019, is that correct?
That would be the hope. Yes. Yes.
Yes?
I just want to make one last comment or, no, thanks, yeah. We were talking about schedule and, dates and whatnot, and the thing about the change is that it applies to significant changes to the plan. And I would urge you to consider what we presented. Definitely the first bullet point is just reiterating what is in section 1.1, the vision and goals that relate to agriculture. We just repeated those phrases, as was done in section 1.6 for economic development. They did the same thing, or that section is set up the same way, to just put that, you know, in the section that it deals with as an introduction. So that could be considered not significant change because it's already in the plan. It's just repeating it in the relevant section. And, you know, also the other comments that we made too, we would fall in that category. I urge you to just review them to see if they would fall as non-substantial changes that could be made within the cycle. So.
So while I could assure you that we'd be willing to, we looked at changing commas and sentence structure at the work session meeting a week ago. And because we were within this 15-day period, the statute seemed clear enough, and with the VLCT's kind of recommendation that no changes be made at this point, even though we read the significant, we thought we would be able to be changing typos and punctuation at this point, or last week also, and then stayed away from it to not risk being out of line with the statute. Christina?
I just want to bring up a point. You guys are an hour and 5 minutes beyond your schedule. I'm just kind of, you guys have to make a decision tonight. I just was waiting for other agenda items, and I didn't realize that the town plan meeting was going to take up the whole agenda.
I was thinking the same thing, and I'll make a motion to place the town plan as printed on the warning for vote by Australian ballot.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Discussion? So I'd like to weigh in discussion-wise. You know, at this point, the select board's responsibility is to steer this town document to a vote by the voters. And I feel like my responsibility as one of 5 voters on the select board is to steer a document that is accurate, that is something that stands a good chance of passing at town meeting. I don't think it would be responsible to put forward a document I think would not pass at town meeting or at the vote. I think that would be a responsibility for us to continue to work on the document until I felt confident that it could pass. And weighing the different paths that the adoption of a new town plan could take. So if it doesn't pass, my thinking is I question how long will it take to adopt one if this one fails versus how long will it take to adopt one if we pause, vote at a later date, and make it a better town plan before we present it to the voters, and which timetable is going to be more likely and shorter to avoid the exposure of not having a town plan, which to me is the most significant risk. It's clearly a living document. I feel assured that the select board and the planning commission are going to take, and with the recommendation of the town planner, are going to take more frequent looks at amending this town plan than the last iteration, where it wasn't amended for 10 years. So I think that because of the risk of this town plan failing at town meeting, actually extending the time that the town is without a town plan, I'm not going to support voting for it at this time. And that's my position, even though I think the plan itself, if it does pass, is way better than not having a town plan. I'd like to work on it for a little longer and present it to the town at the Australian ballot vote in April, which is 1 month later. I think that's a minimal amount of exposure, and I think we can clean up a lot of structural errors and copy editing errors, which to me also does not reflect the residents of this town.
And what do we say that, we were talking about this before, Why didn't we want to just set it for April? I don't remember why. Because I would have wanted that. Why did it?
So there would be a window of not having it, but to me, that's a very short window, and worth the risk.
I go back to the policy that you're working on that specifically says, or is guiding the town to set limits for whenever there's something significantly done in the town to make sure that it doesn't go on forever. And I would disagree that not at some point putting it before the voters is asking for an indefinite future. It's been that way for 4 years, and I see no reason why it would change. I think my opinion is that
it's ready for a vote.
That it is good enough, that it will never be perfect, and it can always be changed.
I'm not sure what the statutory requirements are, Dean, help me out here though, but if we go back to the planning commission and we start modifying the plan, then we have to go through our hearings and our warning periods. So I think you're looking, and then you guys have to do yours again. So I think you're looking at a significant number of months before you could, if everything went absolutely perfectly, you're looking at a significant number of months before you could be back before the town with a special.
Well, that's if the planning commission made them, but if the select board from this second hearing submitted comments to you, it's a much faster process with planning commission review.
Not significant comments.
Can't be significant.
It can't be significant.
They have to be just the dots and the comments. If it's a significant change, then it has to go back to the planning commission, then the whole process starts over.
Which is at least 3 months.
Yes. So in your to me, that addresses the the issue of how long we would be without a town plan. I think we can live without the minor changes that we would be allowed to make without extending this process
Till November.
till November at the earliest.
Why wouldn't it be just like what you just did 2 weeks ago? Why wouldn't that be the process?
Because of significant changes, it sounds like would require the planning commission
From
to.
the first public hearing,
First public hearing to this
where
one.
you made recommendations to the planning commission that came back.
Well, it's possible other parts of the document would be looked at, not just the edits that the select board submitted December 11th. Like the map 12 discussion.
So we needed a meeting like this. You know, we needed 3 of these meetings, I'm telling you.
Charlie?
We had a meeting like this a year ago.
Yeah.
And you guys sent it back to us to work on it for another year, which we did. So, I mean, we did have this meeting after multiple public hearings a year ago. So here's where we are a year later.
I'm
3 years ago when there was.
Oh, there may have been one. I was only here for the one last year we redid it, but I'm just, it was done, you know, we sent it to the select board and it got rejected and sent back to the planning commission to be corrected.
Well, that was also with, it was dovetailed with zoning bylaw recommendations that got reinformed from the town vote, I think.
Don't you have a motion on the table?
We do, this is discussion.
If I understood you right, Matt,
Yeah.
you're saying you think if it went to the town for a vote, it would fail?
No, I'm considering the risk between having a document that is showing traction from the comments that we've received, both at the December 11th hearing, where we had a flood of new additions to try and accommodate people's concerns that were done under a very short time frame. You know, there are definitely errors in it. But, you know, to me, that was a very quick attempt at addressing people who had concerns in supporting the plan. And it was a large number of people that I think the Planning Commission and the Select Board engendered their comments into the plan.
Collectively, the Planning Commission and the Select Board agreed to, we wanted to make it work, we wanted to make the corrections that we received so that we could make the date for a town vote.
Right, and that's the schedule we're on.
Did Lane want to vote?
Well, I think His comment to me was if it seemed like it wasn't going to pass, that he would want to call in and vote. If it seemed like it was going to pass, then he didn't need to call in. So then he wouldn't need to call in and vote. He could abstain. So if it seems like it would be if there are 3 votes for it, then I don't think we'd need to call in. Does anyone?
Well, I'm going to be, I'm in favor of putting it out for the voters, town meeting day.
Fritz, you seem like you are.
I think it's really important.
Should I call Lane?
I'm on the fence because I'm still.
Well, this meeting got overturned.
I think we should put it up. I think it should probably go up to vote.
And do you think I should call Lane before the vote?
I don't. It's up to you whether you want to call Lane. Yeah, give him a call.
50-50.
That's in youth Ivan from skiing. Stir him up.
Yes.
I'm not your counsel, but you might want, however he votes, you might want to consult with your counsel about whether that would be an effective vote, since he is not here, has not heard the testimony, and because the worst thing you could do is have him vote in a certain direction and then have somebody later challenge that vote. But that's entirely up to you what you want to do.
I don't know if he's watching either.
So I guess that's the appeal. If you're watching, call in.
There you go. Oh, that's good.
What's the delay on VCAM?
And the last time I tried to do that, it was about 15 minutes.
15-minute delay?
Yeah.
I watched it for a whole long time.
That's interesting. Someone else have his phone number? 777? It keeps failing immediately. Maybe out of service area?
My phone's in the car where it belongs.
Did you dial 802 first?
I did.
Well, it's a moot point then, isn't it?
It is. Yeah.
You
Okay.
have 777-9191?
Yeah. Maybe someone else can call him?
Do you not pay your bill?
No, I pay my bill.
Does he have to call in? Does he have to call in?
It'd probably be better if he did.
Can I put him on speakerphone?
You could?
Hi, Lane, it's Christina from Town Hall. How are you? Can you call in on the speaker line at the table?
Extension 217.
Do I have to turn this on?
Extension 217? Okay, they were having a hard time getting through
No,
you,
just
so.
have to answer it.
Obviously, I called you.
Weird.
Okay, all
Does
right,
this answer?
we'll try calling you on the line one. If we don't get through to you in 30 seconds, call us, please. Yes, extension 217. Sure, that would be great.
That's what I thought.
He just said he's gonna call that line right there.
The straw poll seemed like that was, I mean, at one point Frank said he was on the fence and then said he thought we should vote.
Well, then go for it.
Yeah. Just gonna make it.
Call the vote. Get it over with.
We need to. Really should.
Just call for the vote.
Yeah, you can call a question if you want.
Yeah.
He's calling in.
He said he was going to, but go ahead and try. It's just no 802 or anything, just 777-9191.
Oh, here come the aliens.
Broadcasting his number across.
Hello, Lane?
Yes.
Hi, it's Matt. So we have made a motion and a second to vote to approve the warning for the town plan as proposed. It's been seconded. In the discussion, I raised my reservation in supporting that at this point and said that I would not be willing to vote for it. We've had a very lengthy discussion, almost 2 hours, at the second hearing, and there have been considerations from the public at this hearing. I'm trying to summarize the discussion of factual errors, citing state statute, typographical errors. I don't know if you received the email from a group of 30 residents looking to add some more changes. That was talked about in the agriculture and forestry plan. And then some other questions came up as far as the legal strength of the future land use maps and how pertinent they are in driving or informing future zoning bylaws, and some discussion around that. Were you able to watch any of this on VCAM?
No, I'm not in an area of it. I think VCAM gets delayed a day. I don't think my experience, it hasn't been live. So no. What's the planning commission saying? That's at the meeting now.
The planning commissioners that are here certainly want to move forward and have this warned on the schedule that we've agreed to. That's pretty fair to say?
Yeah, and I think as far as the errors go, there were errors regarding the energy section.
The energy section.
You really didn't cite a lot of other errors in the town plan.
Yes, and there were errors that came up at our work session meeting that we just decided to.
Grammatical errors.
Yeah.
Not substantive errors.
Well, if that's the case, then it could be a much faster process. But
I feel like we should be more clear with Lane about what actually happened.
Well, maybe you could describe it.
I think this points to the problem of doing this vote this way. If Lane is...
Who's never talking, if it's for me, I can hear the back of it.
Yeah. It's Marty Ehrlich, but she'll come up to the speaker on the table here.
Okay.
Lane?
Oh, just here.
Oh.
Yes.
Marty Ehrlich here. I just wanted to clarify from my perspective, which is only one perspective, that we did not really have substantive errors in the plan. There were grammatical things and this sort of thing. So that was one maybe clarification from my perspective only. The other one was the issue around the future land use map. The Planning Commission feels like it's a simple planning vision map. That's all it is. And I think there was confusion about how people were interpreting that map. But we clarified it, and we think it's fine to let it go forward as a guidance piece for further planning and regulatory work. So I don't know if that helps you any in what happened here tonight in your absence, to enable you to participate in the vote while you weren't here earlier, which we're having problems with as well.
Well, from my point of view, having sat in a couple of your sessions, the Planning Commission, and understanding that this is a working document and that we've made a lot of progress, and it would not be a good thing for the town plan to be invalid. In other words, we need a valid plan. And that was my understanding, even though there are these changes and people have some additional feedback, plus the energy, that we could make some additional changes in either have an amendment or update in either the presidential or the primary November or a year from March. So it was my understanding that we collectively thought it was best for the town to proceed with an approved plan, although not perfect.
Call for the vote.
Did you hear my comment?
Yes. The only other comment, Liam Murphy is here and brought up a question that the select board might consider asking legal counsel the validity of having you vote, having not been here at the meeting. and having not heard the discussions that happened. So that was probably the last thing that was came up before we decided to call.
So I'm taking it the vote right now is tentatively 2-2?
No, I'd say a straw poll is 2-1 to question mark. And we're in the
2-1 to approve it, or 2-1 to delay it?
2-1 and a question mark to approve it. And we're in the discussion section. There's a couple of residents who would like to also add to the discussion.
I would just weigh in and join.
Could you say your name?
Peter Schubart, resident. Just weigh in, and I think calling someone to vote who hasn't participated in a 2-hour discussion on the issue at hand does turn the idea of representative process on its head. So I would object. And I don't understand why, pursuant to 24 VSA 4385B, it's still not clear to me why the select board can't just incorporate further changes. The statute says the legislative body may change the proposed plan or amendment, but shall not do so less than 15 days prior to the final public hearing. I don't understand. It's not clear to me why you've made a series of changes as recently as
this is the final public hearing.
Right. See, the thing is that if we make changes now, changes have to go back to the planning commission to make the, to do the changes. And if we decide to do them, that's fine. But the thing is now we've made changes, so now we have to do another 15 days from tonight, which is going to be past the time that we can put our warning in to our annual report and to make ballots for people to vote on it in March. So at this point in time, we don't have the time in our schedule to do this on a March meeting if it doesn't get approved tonight.
I think I would join in what, Carrie, you were saying earlier, that the changes that occurred in December are so numerous and extensive from the previously warned town plan that I think it makes sense to re-warn and go back again.
Could you pass the mic behind you?
A couple of suggestion possibilities that you could explore.
Can you hear this line?
I can only hear the speakerphone.
Okay.
If somebody asks if they're talking, they have to talk into the speakerphone.
Do you want me to come up there?
Could you? Thank you.
I don't hear VCAM.
Good evening, Lane. It's Liam Murphy. How are you tonight? So,
Hi, Liam. Good, thanks.
A couple of options you may have. You do have until the 29th to make your vote. In the interim, Lane could watch the VCAM presentation or tape and then vote, because then he would have heard the testimony. The second option, you could, if you wanted to approve a town plan, but approve it for a shorter term than a full term. You could approve it and have it expire November 15th. You could have it, approve it and have it expire March 15th of next year. That would then force or allow some time for changes, but it'll not allow the town plan to expire. So just some thoughts.
Thank you. Good suggestions. I thought actually, if the plan, if it's the Planning Commission's intent to update what may get approved tonight, that update or that amendment would be, 12 months from our March town meeting. So whether you make it valid for 1 year or with the confidence will get renewed, you're almost at the same place.
Peter?
Yeah, I was just going to add that.
Can you hear Peter?
If he gets close to the mic.
Yeah, hi Liam. I was just going to add that if the select board chose to consider new additional changes, it would go back to this. It would go back to the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission may or may not decide to make those changes. So that's something to consider as well.
Well, I understand that. It's a consensus process that has taken several years to get to where we are right now.
I'm going to call a question officially.
I think that needs to be seconded. All those in favor of calling the question, say aye. Aye. Opposed? So back to the motion. Could you repeat it?
Could you restate the motion?
The motion was to, okay, approve the town plan as printed for the town meeting for warning for Australian ballot.
And we're really questioning, Lane, whether or not you should vote on that with you not being here to have heard the last 2 hours worth of comments. We appreciate what you've said, but I would say it's really...
I think just to support Robert's rules, the question's been called. Lane, do you understand the motion?
Yes, I do. I understand the motion.
Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I, Lane, say yes.
For aye, I'll say opposed. So 4-1, the motion passes. Thank you, everyone, for coming and participating in the discussion.
Thank you.
Yep. And we'll have this on the town plan at town meeting.
Okay.
Thank you, Lane.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Thanks. Yep, bye.
Get some water.
I can have a water too. Right? Come in.
Where'd everyone go?
Where are we at?
Call this meeting back to order.
7 o'clock agenda.
Yes, we're at agenda item number 3.
I'd like to adjust the first one to go another hour, so we're right on.
Any public comment?
Yeah.
So adjustments to the agenda. Christina?
No adjustments. Keep moving. Keep
Okay.
going.
7:01. Public comment?
Yeah. Wow, that was really crazy, just for comment, but that was tough to endure as a citizen sitting here, I have to say, considering knowing there was plenty of other meetings, just as an FYI for you guys. So, I mean, there was plenty of other opportunities for input. No, I don't need that. So just as public comment from the previous meeting, yes, that was crazy. So, moving on.
Thank you. Select board updates. Check all lane.
Yeah. What's the snow conditions?
Yeah.
Well, we had gotten a lot of emails this afternoon that we'll have to bring up 2 weeks from now.
Okay.
It's a busy morning.
Okay, next agenda item is the FY19 budget. We have,
So, in terms of the totals, and the tax rate and whatnot, I think this and NEMRIC that Mary did are the same numbers. They're in slightly different order in terms of 2 things. One is the Trails Reserve Fund that was voted by an article last year. In this version comes down after the total expense, then it's the revenue minus expense, and then it comes down to the articles, and then the dollar raised by article, with articles, that tax rate, which was the tax rate that was voted on at town meeting, then the surplus that was applied, and then in the year-to-date column, you get the actual tax rate that was set in August, because that's based on the actual grand list. So there, Mary, I'd say today I had 2 complaints. One was that the 40,000 is not showing up here under the approved budget as a transfer to the Trails Fund. And the other is that she doesn't feel the year-to-date column is needed. And perhaps it's confusing.
In the town report?
In the town report. I'd say the reasons I'd suggest for putting it in are, one, it leads to the actual tax rate, because that's based on the actual grand list that was used to set the tax rate in August. And then there are, it's recognized that, for example, revenues is out of whack at this point because we take in money and then we send it to the state. So this is not, ultimately, it's clearly not what was budgeted. And Mike Yantachka actually raised that question at town meeting last year. He said, why do we have tax revenues of $2 million something? And we said from the stage that, it's a 2-step process. We take in money and then we send money out to the state. There are columns, and we've received questions about, well, what's the select board, how much has the select board spent on legal fees? How much has been taken in for revenue, beach revenues? And it seems like even though we're about at the half-year mark, we're not at the 12-month mark, there's some year-to-date figures that are relevant that seems like it would be useful. But so I think the difference is in format, not in content. The actual, the actual numbers match, but it's a difference in format.
Historically, there's a year-to-date column.
There has been since 2013.
Okay. So if we change it, we're changing what people have looked at, making it different than they've seen for the last 5 years.
Yep.
Christina?
So, just to kind of reference, Mary did the town report last in 2013, and I think because of how many questions we field on our side that people get confused very easily is the reason why that column wasn't there. Second off, the 40,000, I truly believe to represent how much money went to trails needs to be under the trails line, not additional articles, because you need to know what each department spent. And yes, it was an additional article, but I don't feel there's any reason to have that separated out, because it's not, when someone is glancing through the town report, they don't remember what the article was, they have to go back, they have to look at it. It's not an accurate representation of what Trails actually has for their funds. There are a lot of very highly educated people that study that town report and are prepared to come to town meeting. And they look at all those numbers, so if there's an error in there, they will find it. And that will definitely, that's shown up before.
Yeah, I'm kind of thinking it'd be a good idea to have that 40,000 identified other than just additional article.
Well, so that category, additional articles, Dean, it doesn't go back far enough, but when conservation was actually being funded,
right,
the 90,000 annually, was the last time that was done was 15, 16? I'm taking it.
Yeah.
They got their own line item, don't they?
Yeah, it goes in their line item.
Even though they receive an additional article?
I'm pretty sure.
That was always a separate article for conservation, right? Or no?
In 2013, 14, or town meeting 14, it was a line item under transfers for conservation.
Okay, so this year, the additional article, budget 1819, has $80,000.
There's 2 articles, 30,000 for recreation, 50,000 for generators.
So how would those be represented? Would you erase the 40,000 from the lines and put it in the trails and just have all blanks until we get to the 80,000? You know, it seems important that we show that we're budgeting for those articles, but I don't know if it's important that we show trails there, if trails is represented in their own line item. But I wouldn't get rid of the additional article line.
Trails has their own fund.
Right. So I wouldn't see any issue representing.
So next year, when you're going backwards, you would say what was the 80,000 for, assuming they both passed. The one would be identifiable under the rec item, the 30, but the 50 would be out there with nothing to do. So I don't know, I guess it's 6 one, half a dozen of the other.
I mean, on the budget column, we have articles, why couldn't we just separate it up on the list?
Oh, just have the name of an article right where it says additional articles?
Yeah.
And just have 2 lines there?
Yeah, have 2
30,000
lines there,
and
one
50,000.
30,000.
So I think what Frank's saying is where it says additional articles, have 2 lines, one that says article for recreation fund,
right, yeah.
and another 30,000, another one that says article for generators.
So that's for the budget year. The question is what to do, whether to keep the trails money there or show that under the transfers above, which, and then Fritz's point is next year, actually, I don't think the article this year requires the recreation money to go into the Recreation Reserve Fund. I think it's just to be spent on.
No, it does go into the Recreation Reserve Fund. It's not earmarked for the tennis court and playground, or the beach, rather.
So, I guess take Chris's point, next year, what will you show for the 80,000?
That'll be a problem.
Where will that be? Where will the 80,000 be?
Well, just the 50 from the generators is going to be,
under
the 30 would be visible, like the trails would be visible.
Under Recreation
next year,
Reserve
if it passed.
Fund?
Right, if it passed. But the generator 50,000 would not show up anywhere visibly.
So, I mean, historically, that's not quite accurate because additional articles you're saying was 50, but it was actually 80.
No, you'd have 2 lines. 2 additional article lines, one for 30, one for 50.
But you're saying recreation would be shown under transfers next year? Next year, where will recreation be shown? Say we're in next year's budgeting session.
Oh, and then you'd only see 1 additional article historically. Mm-hmm. It's not elegant. It's Christina.
How long has the additional article line been on there?
Good question.
I think in the range of 3 years or so.
So it's not necessary to have that there then?
It's not, I mean, you know, things have changed over time. I guess I never want to estimate the intelligence of the voters. I think they're able to figure things out. And I think the more information we give them, the better off they are.
But the additional articles are just an increase to certain departments' budgets.
Sometimes.
When there's articles.
If they are, they're an increase. If they're not for a certain department, they're not. Like the generator thing.
Recreation has a capital line, capital fund line. So you could, in all reality, for the budget of 18-19, make that line the line item plus the additional 30,000.
The board decided not to. We discussed that at a meeting and decided that we wanted the additional article to highlight the issue to come up as a discussion item at town meeting, rather than just burying it in the select board's budget, which we could do. We wanted the article to elicit a discussion about the capital reserve fund for recreation.
So it's an article. So I'm just curious as to when it's put into the budget. I mean, like for instance, in Nemrick, you know, we're just going to transfer 30,000 to the recreation capital reserve fund. And so when we print off the numbers for the recreation capital reserve fund, it's just going to be a $30,000 increase. So I'm wondering why the numbers on this one can't reflect the same. I mean, you have it as a separate article on the town meeting. And I'm I'm just, on the warning, I'm just curious as to why it wouldn't just be included in the budget.
I think Fritz spoke to that when he said that one would be, if it got approved, and it would show up in that line, like you're also saying. But what would be lost is the 50,000 if it was passed for the generators. And what line would that go into?
That would go into the improvements and maintenance that we have that we bought the carpet out of, I would assume. That would be the line item we would pay for the generator out of, or, am I correct? I mean, you approve $50,000 for a generator, it's not just gonna kinda hang out there, I mean, it will probably go into.
So then you go to, is that a capital, carpet a capital
Yes.
improvement or maintenance?
It's improvements,
To
and you
repair.
guys set off certain amounts that you put into it, and that amount stays there until it's used for what it was earmarked for.
Yeah, I mean, that is the line it would go into. So then the question is, does the board want to show the additional articles as extra information or
You're adding
not?
up the Australian ballot stuff. You got the budget and then you got the articles. So the total for your financial Australian ballot portion is going to be a sum of these additional articles plus the budget.
Right.
Now, if you didn't have additional
That's fine.
articles, how would you tie the budget to that Australian ballot part?
They are separate articles. That's how it was.
That wouldn't add up.
Until the next year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, they can be grouped. I mean, it's not that they can't be grouped on the budget. I mean, that's fine. I mean, we've got to, I mean, they were to approve the articles anyways, and that's going to explain what that budget line is.
I think it looks like we have plenty of room in this category. I think for the purpose of information, each additional article would be named. So you'd have a line that says Trails Reserve Fund and the two populated columns for the 40,000. The second one would say Trails Reserve Fund article, and it would only show in those two columns. Below it would say Recreation Capital Reserve Fund, and it would only show $30,000 budgeted for 18-19 in one column. And then a third one would say town improvement
And then
for
those
generators.
Those articles would be identified for the 3 years until it falls off.
Until it falls off the,
Yeah.
right, the
That
display.
sounds like a good way to do it.
And then it's clear.
Something like that.
Yep, and then your change, I guess, would be, yeah,
It works.
nice formulas.
Okay.
Does that look?
Good.
What was the other difference?
The year-to-date column.
Year-to-date.
So,
I like seeing year-to-date. Especially informative to me is the tax rate with the surplus applied. Until serving on the board, I really didn't understand that the town approved a municipal budget with an assumed tax rate, and yet that isn't the tax rate until everything comes together in August, including the surplus. Also, every year with the independent auditor's recommendations, we decide how much of any surplus to keep to insulate the town for cash flow purposes. And that's an active decision that affects the tax rate quite a bit. I think we've been historically keeping around 5% of the budget, which is a large number, and if it was decided to change that to 4 or 6, that would alter the effective tax rate significantly. So I think that's important information to see how the board acted between the approval of the budget and the setting of the tax rate. I like seeing those two numbers next to each other.
I do need to tweak the tax rate formulas. They're not coming out right now, but that was, the actual tax rate was 0.1715.
Right. Oh, what is it now?
Something changed in the formula.
Okay. It also changed for the budget.
Right.
That should be 0.1994.
Right.
And the change is 0.0279.
The dollars isn't right.
Yeah, I know.
Under the dollars to raise.
When I moved these up here, I think it changed it changed some of the formulas.
But you can get that.
Yeah, I can, yep.
The math isn't in question, just the display.
Right.
Any other comments on the budget? Christina?
So you guys had put that you were going to discuss the possibility of having a dental rider applied to our insurance. And you guys never really got back to discussing it. And it was kind of pulled amongst us because everybody would have to get it. It's an additional cost to the town of $570 some odd a year.
For everybody?
For everybody to be on it. And I believe that's the number. And I know it was polled about Margaret and myself would like to have the rider. I don't know about anybody else. I just know of having a conversation with Margaret. So you guys haven't addressed that yet for your final budget number, and I didn't know if that was something you could revisit.
What do people think?
I think for $500, if it's in this budget or not in this budget, it doesn't matter. It's a small amount of money. If it was $5,000, then I might want to think about
And if you
placekeeping
guys
for
look
it.
at the printout that Mary gave you, it's listed in one of her notes that you guys were going to revisit it under insurance. And I'm not sure of the exact number, so I might feel a little better if you look at the exact number before you okay it.
I'd be supportive of adding that in this year. It's a small, negligible amount to the budget, and
With a confirmation on the number.
I think it was in the range of 550,
580. Yeah.
580 maybe.
We don't want to lose, we don't want to have some benefit not covered. Make sure we got a clean slate of everything.
You might find it easily, maybe. I don't know. There's so many votes.
All right.
Thank you.
Do you have any idea of the number?
In benefits.
Got it.
Just 589.
589 annually for the orthodontic rider, and that's with the 2018 rates.
So we'll go under employee benefits.
Yep, with the rest of, it's under the Delta Dental. Delta Dental already has an item that I believe you're looking at a budget fiscal year 2019, $9,950. And it would be an additional 589 on top of that.
So that would make it 10,539. would make the delta 1,039.
So total expenses of 3,145,465, and rate to be raised by taxes is 1,761,899. Is that what you have, Matt?
The first one I did get to. The second one, budget for revenues. What'd you say, 1,761,899?
Yep.
Yep. I guess double check the dollars to raise with articles.
They don't, oh, okay, in the spreadsheet.
Yeah. Would also be 899. It's the same.
Yeah, oh, this changed. Let me,
Yeah, but just, I guess.
Yeah.
1,841,899 is the actual.
Oh, here it is.
It's missing the full 80.
Yeah.
Yeah.
336. That looks better.
It's just missing the 589 still somehow.
You didn't change it. You didn't change it up at the top.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
You didn't change it up at the top.
That would help.
Yep.
That's right.
Although,
Yeah.
no, that's right. Just no populated column. I don't know why it's populated down too. That,
In the,
yeah, dollars to raise with surplus. Since we haven't calculated the surplus for this budget year, that should be, it's blank
oh, yeah,
before you started editing, yeah. Like the paper copy is blank right now.
Okay.
Somehow that got.
Really, it would be the same as dollars to raise with articles, but, I mean, it would be the same number.
Well, we don't know what the surplus is until August.
Oh, okay, yep.
That's what that line
Okay.
is.
So say 0 there, okay.
And are we back to, what's the effective tax rate?
Looks like 0.0001. It was 1.1994, now it's 0.1995.
Oh, you know what?
Is this?
I wouldn't populate that bottom tax rate, right? Because we don't have the surplus
That's,
for the budget year.
Right, but, yeah, I mean,
We haven't applied a surplus yet.
So you're saying tax rate with articles?
And 4 lines up, we have, yeah, tax rate with articles.
Just blank?
Yeah, it just doesn't exist yet. And I'd probably get rid of the delta, because the 0.1672 on to the right of that one also is dependent on that line, or that field. Something happened, the 40,000 is missing. And I don't know if you want to do it now or you want to.
Right, yeah, I don't think we need to, unless you need the numbers.
Yeah, that got the tax rate with surplus. Yep, yep. Okay, sorry. Anything else with the budget people want to?
I'm good.
So do we have a motion to approve the budget? Or does it just come with the approval of the
numbers in
the town report?
the warning?
Yeah, you can do it either way. It's, if you're,
Any preference from the board? No. Okay, moving on to the town report, which includes the budget.
or town warning, town meeting warning.
Town meeting warning, thank you.
Yep. Just to point out, the Article 5 doesn't specifically say Recreation Reserve Fund. It's for the purpose of recreation capital improvements, which
I believe that might be what the account's called.
I saw that for Article 4 as well. When we were talking earlier, it doesn't say which reserve fund it's going to. You know, the generators.
I think with
Did the carpet?
Article 4, we discussed that it really need to go, it didn't need to go into a reserve account, because if we can't figure out how to get them installed in a year, that we shouldn't be spending the money anyway.
Oh, it's just being done, okay,
Just be done in a year.
got it.
It should be. It's not one of those things that needs to be reserved.
it's not, yeah, it's
Yeah, I would think,
Right, but we put that on the, what did we put on for the generators? You put in the capital improvement fund or the
Well,
repairs?
I mean, I think that's where it would go through, but you, as Fritz said, didn't want to specify that.
Because if it's in a capital fund, then it stays there until it's used for what you guys, but if you just leave it there and you don't use it, it goes back to the taxpayer.
The generators will get done. The recreation stuff we won't. Probably.
So if you wanted to accumulate, you probably should specify the fund.
yeah. Yeah, that was definitely the intent.
So you just add that after capital improvements to be added to the capital reserve fund.
The Recreation Capital Reserve Fund? Or it just says Recreation Reserve Fund. I guess is the name of it. So will the town approve raising $30,000 by taxes in addition to those monies raised pursuant to Article 3 and 4 for the purpose of,
Recreation capital improvements, comma, be added to the capital reserve, or to the recreation reserve fund, comma, which approval shall not become effective. You just stick it in there.
to be added to the Recreation Reserve Fund?
How about, for the purpose of making recreational capital improvements through the Recreation Reserve Fund? Or I guess I was just thinking, it seems like something is needed before recreation for the purpose of undertaking or making recreation capital improvements.
It says for the purpose of recreation capital improvements.
Right.
That's pretty good.
Will the town
Okay.
approve reason clear? For the purpose of funding recreation capital improvements? Or just for the purpose of,
How about for the purpose of adding to the recreational reserve fund in order to make recreation capital improvements?
it's long.
What don't you like about this?
The thing that flags for me is that it focuses the purpose on the fund rather than
Right.
the improvements
Right.
by getting it there first.
Right. Is that good or bad?
I think bad.
Oh, okay.
Because the idea is not the
Not-
fund,
not-
it's that
right, yeah.
capital improvements and the
Okay.
mechanism is by putting it in the fund.
Yep.
I'm fine with the way it is.
Yeah, I think I'm okay with it is, with Fritz's suggestion.
Which is what?
For the purpose of recreation capital improvements to be added to the recreation reserve fund.
Is there a comment there or not?
Yeah,
Yeah?
bracketed in comments. Okay. If I remember my hard brace rules correctly. It's been a while.
Which approval shall not become legalese.
Okay, so let me just read it if I can.
Please.
Are you ready? Or, will the town approve raising $30,000 by taxes in addition to those monies raised pursuant to Article 3 and Article 4 for the purpose of recreation capital improvements, comma, to be added to the Recreation Reserve Fund, comma, which approval shall not become effective until further approval by Australian ballot, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay.
None for the 50,000. You changed the numbers for Article 3.
Yeah, we'll do.
Take your question mark out of Article 10.
It is a question.
Right. Okay.
And then as far as the email received at 4 o'clock today from Mary, is that the intent of that attachment to replace what's below Mary Mead's signature on the warning?
Right.
Okay.
And what's the change?
The provisional ballot, because of the way we register voters now, they do same day registering to vote. So there's no quorums anymore about if someone's on our on our list or not. People used to be able to request a provisional ballot just so that they could vote that day. Everybody, I mean, I have a computer up there, they come up to me, they register to vote, then in there. And then there's also stipulations in there about, providing an ID and everything else, and really, someone could bring me a Green Mountain Power bill with an address on it, and I have to register them, so The state of Vermont is pretty lax on laws.
So this is just new, conforms to the new laws?
Secretary of State has this new, it comes right straight from their website, the wording.
Did they send a notification that we should be doing this, or this was?
It is, when you go to when clerks go to the Secretary of State's and this says this needs to be posted, like we will post this same information at the voting polls also. So this is the information for voters.
Got it. And they've updated it this year?
Yeah.
Great, so everyone's okay with swapping out the old language for the new language?
Do that on approval of the whole thing.
We have a motion?
Motion to approve the town meeting warning as amended.
Second, anyone? Seconded by Carrie. Any discussion? Yes, Christina?
No.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? 4 to 1.
I'll get it and have them available for your signatures tomorrow.
Great.
Or some point this week.
Awesome. Thank you. Town report? Is this fine-tooth comb time, or?
Sure.
Christina?
There's another one I want to talk about, January 29th. That's when petitions have to be into us, but our ballot is not set until January 31st. Because people have 2 days to be able to remove their name from an office. So just so you're aware, the 29th at 5 o'clock is the last time to turn in petitions. But like last year, Ed Stone, in the 48 hours, sent in a letter to take his name off from town moderator. So that, our ballot is not officially set until the 31st. Just so you're aware of statute dates. Wednesday.
And the ballot isn't in the town plan, though, right? Or in the report?
No.
No.
But the office, the people you're voting for are.
Yes.
That's not set till
Yeah,
the 31st.
right, so, the.
Oh, it is. What page is that?
It's blank right now. It's right after the warning. It's right, it's like, right, it's page like.
Page 8?
Yeah, so.
The birds on the wire? Oh.
Just before the.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Look at that.
That one has been in previous, yeah.
Poor little guy in the middle.
So this has to go to print on what day?
Well, what I've talked to the printing company about is bringing it to them on the 30th, and then they give us 2 days or a day window to make any changes.
Got it. So that'll still work.
By February 1st,
Okay.
or the end of day, 5 o'clock.
I mean, every town in the state of Vermont has the same
same
statute.
thing.
So, I mean, it's not like these printers, this is the first time they've ever seen it, I mean, if these printers give you a production date before that, then they obviously haven't done a lot of printing for a town. So.
I haven't looked at this much, but on the April 10th morning,
Yeah.
we have 2 Article 2s, and it does state for tennis courts and playgrounds for the town beat.
Page 11?
Okay, you're right, yeah. That was quick. That might have been an old version, because I did change it.
Good catch.
Yeah.
I'm working off the version you gave me.
Yeah, that's fine.
So I think they should be consistent with whatever's on our.
Yes, correct.
March
Yeah.
warning.
It'll be Article 1, 2, 3, and indicate the articles with money to be raised.
Yep. There's Article 2 with the propane generators should have a price on it already.
Should what?
Should already have 50,000. That's a set price. I mean,
It
what-
is,
what-
but it could be changed on the floor.
Well, that's true. Gotcha. On that article, that second article too, should it be the same as the one above it? Doesn't go Article 1 and Article 2? Additional to those monies raised pursuant to Article 1 and Article 2?
Yeah. And then continue on with the same wording.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that part's right.
And we've readjusted the
Accumulating
budgets.
sufficient funds, and then you would add in the language from the,
You actually accumulated sufficient funds for something like that, but it was whatever we just approved.
okay, great. Okay,
Yeah.
so all
Like
that
I
gets
said,
struck.
The same
Yeah.
as the article.
Yep.
Do we have a motion to,
Now was the school,
They're going to be providing items, I think, on the 29th or the 28th, or the end of the
and
week.
we were planning on putting that
Yes.
information within this?
Yeah, the page, the pay rates, or the amount paid is, that they did send that today.
Okay.
will the table of contents have the page numbers
Yes,
once it's finalized?
yes.
Is there a draft of that somewhere?
The table of contents?
No, the draft of the town report. Is there a draft yet? Just what they have, paper version?
Paper
Yeah.
version, yeah.
Nothing online yet?
Not online yet, no,
Okay.
but,
No,
I
it's
gave,
understandable because it's a work, but,
yeah, I gave a copy to Mary.
yeah, I saw that.
Okay, I mean, I'll print out another version and give you a copy.
That's fine, we'll share until
Yeah.
we get the final one.
Okay.
You got mine.
Take it home and read it tonight.
I do study it though.
Are you still on track for the same amount of pages as we've done
It's
historically?
looking close to about what it was last year. Yeah, the school, I think, is going to be 8 pages, and so that's going to be 170 something total. Which is what it was last year.
I guess I have a quick question, and then we can get moving. I don't even want to change anything, but page 166, last page.
Actually, the version, oh, the very last page, okay.
Yeah, the last line on it says legal trails,
Yeah.
0.46 miles. We must have more than that now.
So legal trails is a category of basically town highway that's on the state produced town highway map that is basically, there's a statute regarding this category. It's basically,
These are those old roads.
yeah,
some are
well,
thrown
no,
up.
they're not the ancient highways,
Oh,
but
right.
they're roads that don't need to be maintained even in the winter, even in the summer. Like Class 4 roads need to be maintained in the summer for summer travel.
So this is
And
like
legal
that
trails,
section of Guerin Road that goes over to Heinsberg. And
it's actually McGuire Pent Road.
what?
McGuire Pent is the legal
Ah.
trail,
All right.
yeah.
And where's this trail on the
That,
back page?
which one are you talking, the legal
It's
trail?
a boardwalk.
Boardwalk?
That is in the park.
Oh, I figured it probably was.
Anyone want to make a motion to approve the town report with the edits?
Sounds great. I'll make a motion to approve the town report with the edits presented.
Is there a reason why there's same thing on the back?
We have a motion on the table. Can we get a second and then do discussion?
Sure. I'll second.
Okay.
I'm just looking at the, I mean, when we look in the front, we got the table of contents, but when we look in the back, we've got another one.
Yeah, the index is alphabetical, and so the table of contents is like page 1, page 2, page 3, and then, so if you're looking for taxes.
Back page is an index, the front page is table of contents.
Sounds like a waste of paper.
We can take it out.
Thank you.
Say no? Yeah, I wouldn't take out the index. It's just, it's always there. Although I don't disagree with Frank's comment.
Omnipresent.
So, I'm all for the motion.
All those in favor? Aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you, Dean.
Sure, and thanks to the clerk's office for providing some of the data, the births, deaths, marriages, all that good stuff.
Yeah. I gave Dean my little adjustment on the zoning, which was basically
Zoning board.
take out one word.
Zoning?
Yeah, in the zoning part.
Was the word zoning?
No, the word was opinion.
Make a motion to approve the certificate of highway mileage to be approved by the
It looks like,
acting select board chair.
it looks like it needs a majority. There's 3 lines. On the second page, part 3, signatures.
Yeah, I think as many can sign as want to. I think, some boards only have 3 members.
Oh, okay.
I think I left the official version in the office.
I'll second it. Well, will you take
Got
out
no
the...
changes, yeah.
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 Whoa.
To be signed by as many people as feel like it.
I'm still gonna be the only one?
Could be.
You seconded?
Yep.
All those in favor, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Patterson Fuels has a preventative maintenance contract.
I make a motion and authorize the chair or acting chair to sign it for the preventative maintenance contract with Patterson Fuels.
I second that.
Any discussion? Yeah?
Just a typo. They just happened to put it in bold and underlined it.
Yeah, wow. Equipment.
But that's fine.
All those in favor, indicate by saying aye.
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 Aye. Opposed?
I'll make a motion, we go into, how do we do this? To
Control board.
Oh,
to reconvene as a liquor control board,
recess as select board?
recess the select board and reconvene, and convene as the liquor control board.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, it's the,
Motion to approve the request for renewal of first-class restaurant bar license to sell malt and vinous beverages to Roland's Place Incorporated.
Second.
looks like there's many opportunities for signatures. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? I think we have one more.
Motion to approve request for renewal of second-class license to sell malt and vinous beverages to Wits End LLC, DBA Old Brick Store.
I'll second.
All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye?
Aye.
Opposed?
Motion to, what is it now?
The bid.
To terminate ours are.
Oh. Adjourn?
Will be terminated, well, no, that one's a little too early for adjourn.
Oh, yeah.
Adjourn is liquor license, liquor board, and reconvene is select board.
Second. Kathy will have to decide.
Oh, I see.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed?
So with the plant maintenance and brush hogging contracts on, just to get you to start thinking about it, we do usually send those out in February in order to get proposals back in March so that you can review them before the grass starts growing. So probably put it on the next agenda if you want, if you have any edits.
You know that little piece that we talked about down on Thompson's Point, East Thompson's Point?
On the east side or north side?
Well, north side.
Yep.
Is that in here?
It is,
Or did-
yeah.
Okay.
Oh, with the trees,
Well,
there's some young
I think it is.
evergreen trees growing up in the field, and there's discussion about how to manage that.
yeah. Looked like it needed to be brush hogged. I didn't know where
I
that-
believe they're fields B and F, but I'll check that.
Say that what?
I believe they are field on the last page of that brush hogging. I believe they're fields B and F. I'll look at that map.
And our next meeting is February 5th?
12th.
12th.
Is there a reason why we talk about 4-cycle weed whackers and don't want 2-cycle?
That happened a while back. I think actually they seem to, all the commercial, the contractors all seem to use 4-cycle anyway, because most of them respond with, that's what they have.
Do we have a weed whacker cop to go out and check them?
It's complaint-based. Sorry.
I'm just wondering why it would be a condition, kind
It was a
of thing.
previous board. I think there was something about either they're more efficient or they're.
It's certainly more environmentally friendly.
I'm
There
sure
could be
they're
a noise
quieter.
issue,
I'm
but
sure they're quieter.
Okay.
they are much quieter.
Yeah.
I think Steel exclusively sells them now. They don't have a 2-cycle option anymore.
Well, honey, keep rid of the mosquitoes if the thing's not blowing smoke.
So that's an FYI. The minutes, I'm not sure that I have
Yeah.
them in my packet.
Since Kath isn't here, I suggest holding off on those.
Great. Everyone okay with that?
Motion to hold off on a minute.
Is there a draft minute posted to the website? Someone asked for them today and I couldn't find them.
She sent them over the weekend, and I haven't posted them yet, so I will. I know that Gail Callahan asked for them. I don't know if she's the
Yeah,
one.
someone brought to my attention it was 5 days and they weren't there.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I'm not sure, I'm not in charge of that, so.
Right, it was actually, they met on Tuesday, so, yeah, it was a short week.
5 days.
It's working days.
I don't think statute specifies that. I think statute just says 5 days.
Calendar days, yeah.
Yeah, they don't specify business days or not.
This needed your signature, or not?
Just to bring to you guys' attention on the town report, there's a
Yeah.
little inconsistency when you put that 40,000 on the lower section in the expense total compared to other years. Other years, once the articles have been voted, it's now a budget item. So when you look at your town report on the total expenses, the second to last page has an expense total on the bottom. And if you look at the previous year, that has articles in it, approved 16-17 and actual 16-17, the articles were moved into the budget line. If you look at approved 17-18, the total that's on the bottom is actually $40,000 short of the total expenses that were paid out that year. Because the $40,000 was the trails, but it wasn't added into the total expense line, it gets added in a line below. But once it's voted on, it's a part of the budget.
Yeah, there weren't any other articles in the previous year that raised money to be paid from taxes.
And it's just because the expenses are what you're raising your taxes for, so once it's actually,
Provisionally.
but once it's voted on and it's approved by the voters, it's a part of the budget.
But it doesn't hold, it doesn't have any bearing on what the actual tax rate will be.
But it does on the expenses that the town spent.
Well, that's a historical number, but the budget one is there for people to look at, the one that they're actually voting on.
3,000,046, that's missing the 40,000 for trails.
Correct, but that's historical, that no one's voting on that anymore.
That's the point of the 40,000 now being moved into their line item because it has been voted on.
So in NIMRIC, Mary puts that in above the line, above
Right,
the
because it
total.
becomes a part of their budget. Once you guys vote on it, it's a part of Trails budget. So it comes above that line. It would then become 3,000,086.
Yeah, I don't disagree with the way NIMRIC accounts for the money, but I don't see any inconsistency with the way citizens can view how the tax burden is being assessed.
It just makes our expenses look less when they were actually more than the year before.
Well, in that line, it makes them look less, but when you look at the tax rate with surplus applied, it doesn't. Or when you look at the tax rate with articles, it doesn't. The information is there for people to see how much expenses need to be raised.
The tax rate's based on a grand list, and that can change depending on, the 2016 townwide reappraisals.
And the grand list is there for people to see
But
too.
your expenses, what we spend out of this town, that is a solid number, is what I'm trying to say.
And that's represented on the last page, dollars to raise with articles, 1712291. So it's there for people to see. It's just not where NIMRIC shows it from an accounting standpoint. But I don't think it's missing. It's just displayed differently for people to look at.
I guess I'm not talking about a tax rate, and take tax rate right out of the whole equation.
I didn't mention tax rate. I said dollars to raise with articles or additional articles. I mean, the information is there. They're on different lines than NIMRIC accounts for. So I don't see I hear what you're saying as far as the way the accounting software considers the word expense. It's not showing up in that field.
It is not consistent with anything we've done in the past either. Especially considering you like having that actual year-to-date on what they spent. Well, actual year-to-date expenses for that year was 40,000 more. But that's all I'm trying to say is you want to see the year-to-date what we've shelled out, and once we make that transfer to that reserve fund, that's part of that.
Well, I think that's part of the larger discussion that I've had with on my 4 years on the board with Mary and with you and with Dean, and even when Charlie was still on, of do we want the town report to have an Excel spreadsheet or a NIMRIC layout? And what are the benefits and drawbacks of showing the actual accounting software fields versus showing an Excel fields? And what the Excel, my takeaway from those discussions is that what the Excel presentation can offer is slightly more illustrated information about the town's expenses and revenues than what NIMRIC offers without a full audit. And they have the audit report there, which is, for me, what makes me comfortable that people who want to see how the accounting happens, they have the independent audits report to see all of those numbers. But this, breaking it out with Excel allows us to illustrate differently, but all the numbers are still there. And what we committed to was that Mary and Dean would be working together to make sure that what was presented in the independent audit for numbers is consistent with what's on the Excel spreadsheet. And we wanted to make sure those numbers absolutely match. And I think they do, they're just presented differently.
Well, and on this this format, it shows you what was approved and how it was approved. And so it compares with what was approved then and what's being approved now.
Yeah, it can illustrate a different narrative of the history of the town than what the accounting software can do.
Right.
So, I mean, that's why we decided to stay with the Excel spreadsheet and still have the audit report in the town report. If there's no further business, is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn. Second.
All those in favor? Aye?
Aye.
Opposed?
Maybe we should call Wayne. We're stuck on the motion to
Thank
adjourn.
you.
Can you help us out later?
What's the-